All right, so I was contacted by a gentleman from the Netherlands, even though I'm here in Washington State, who tracked me down through the college and talked to me about some of the videos and things. He's playing piano and practicing, and he was interested in knowing more about music theory for pieces that he was or is practicing and studying. He's working right now on the second prelude from Well-Tempered Clavier, and I know that there was a video of the first one that I put up there that he and other people had seen, and so I thought I'd do a quick sort of chord and form analysis. This is probably going to take a half hour, but of this as well, a cursory one. And before we do that, I thought maybe it would be good to talk about the organization of these things and what we can expect and some tools about it. But that's sort of the global view. This is the one where it's very kinetic, and it's like etc. like that, with the left hand going as well. So I thought rather than just diving into this, we would talk about some global things. When we've done the chorales, we've talked about what's happening globally, the cadences and things, and that's how we figure stuff out. And I think that's probably the right approach for this as well. So let me just talk a few things about these preludes, at least these first ones. They start and they have a process that's been applied to them. So I'm going to zoom in here, I think, and bring this so that we can see better what's going on just on this music right here. Sure. And just like the first one was a bunch of arpeggios that went up twice per measure, you know, da 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 dee da da dee da 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 dee da da dee. This one has this process applied to it as well, but it's simply just a chord progression and voice leading that's been played on. Now, the reason why this one's a little more difficult is because there's a bunch of non-chord tones in there as well, whereas the first prelude is arpeggiating primarily just chord tones, and so it's much easier to understand. But just like when we were talking about the chorales in those other videos, it's like what to not look at. In other words, to not look at some of the weird chords if you're a first-year student, and to not worry too much about naming all the non-chord tones and things like that. Here, if we can see what the process is, so that we can avoid looking at all the non-chord tones and getting lost in the weeds, we'll be able to see the chords much clearer and see what's going on. But let's sort of just talk about what happens in a prelude here. You've got a process, in this case, this arpeggiating with these neighboring tones going on, and it's quite engaging. That's great. That's how the piece is mostly built, over chords. And preludes will start in a home key area, and you'll get like a phrase. This is a little harder to tell than a chorale because there's not like a great physical rhythmic stopping point, but you'll get a phrase in the home key, right? And then you will go to a new key, right? In fact, maybe I'll change colors here. You transition to another key and you'd go for a stretch. So you transition and then you arrive at a new key. And generally here it's going to be harmonically unstable, and we're going to change keys, and then we usually have some kind of process which eventually brings us back around to the home key, right? Back to the home key. And in this particular piece, we have a big cadenza here at the end. Now, just because it says it's going to the home key doesn't mean you're going to get a final conclusion until the very end, but you will be able to see that. You might say, well, what keys would we go to? And how do we find these cadences of the phrases if the rhythm stays the same throughout? And usually this is going to be like 4 measures. You know, could be 2, but, you know, and in here, you're going to see phrases as well, and they could be 4 measures or 2, or they could be a sequence, right? Which is sort of an idea that keeps getting repeated again and again at different levels. What keys do we go to? Well, these pens are not great. Well, a recent video we did, we talked about the area that we like to do things in. So if you draw yourself a box like this and you put your first key, and in this we're in the key of C minor, so I'm going to put myself there, right? C minor has 3 flats, okay? And these are going to be my minor keys, and then these are going to be my major keys. The relative major to this is E flat major, right? So when we start here, this is another possibility to go to. In fact, most of these pieces like to go to the dominant or 5 steps up key, or if we're in the minor, we sometimes go to the relative major like that. And so 5 steps up will be 2 flats, and that will be G minor right there. So this is my home key, and this is my dominant, tonic and dominant, or 1 and 5 areas, right? And then its relative minor is C minor. Sorry, not C minor. My bad. B flat major. It's late here. And then we should, just to be thorough, say, well, what's 4? And 4 flats is F minor. And then it would be A flat major, okay? Now, if we're in a classical or Baroque or Romantic piece of music and we're changing keys and things, you generally, unless we're getting on in the time period and people are trying to be like post-Beethoven, really interesting, we like to go to the dominant, and we like to go to the relative major if we're in minor. And then also sometimes we go to these other places. They can be prominent as well. It's possible also you could go to the parallel major as well. That's a possibility. In fact, in this piece of music, Bach is going to go to the dominant, and then he's going to go to there, and then he's going to come back here. And it's questionable. I don't think he goes to these other places, but these chords are going to feature prominently because they're part of these keys as well. Okay, so let's see if we can find how we recognize the chords from his process of what he's doing here, and then we can start identifying chords and labeling and keys, and we still look for cadences and things like that too. Okay, so we know that we're in the key of C minor. 2 red pens. I guess we're in red here. We're in the key of C minor. Okay, and the pattern that's happening here is we have a chord tone, a non-chord tone. It's a little neighbor, comes back up, and then a chord tone. And it's in the same thing here as well. There's a chord tone, a non-chord tone, and a chord tone. So if we look here, there, there, and here, here, and here, right? And by the way, this is usually a repeat of this, just like in the first prelude that we saw. Then we see we've got a C and a G, and a C and an E flat, and an E flat, and a C. This is a C minor chord, which makes it a 1 chord, okay? And as far as figured bass goes, you know, we could, if we're not music theory students and we don't understand about figured bass, we could leave that alone. But I'm going to mention it anyways, and if it's useful for you, that's good, and if not, then you can just say, oh, it's that thing that they do. We put figures or numbers to help us know whether the chord's in root position, first inversion, second inversion. They have different characteristics the more you flip a chord. And so that's all good. But then 1 chord, C minor chord right here. I think I'm just going to put C minor here so we can remember that, okay? And then here, like, again, 4 measure phrase. I'm just going to, it's like 1, something, something, back to 1. I just wanted to show you this is a C and a G and an E flat. Again, non-chord tone, non-chord tone. We can sort of catch this, and then this is a repeat of that, right? C, G, E flat, C, E flat, G. It's another 1 chord right there. And I'm going to bet that we have 1 chord, something else that's kind of a dominant chord, 5 chord or a 7 chord to bring us back to here. Okay, let's check out some of these other notes right here. So there, there, and there, there, and there. These, since we know the process, I've circled these ones before as non-chord tones, and now I'm showing you these are chord tones. It's not very consistent. Sorry for that. But it's an F, A flat, and a C, right? F, A flat, C. So this is F minor, but C is in the bass. So first off, in the C minor scale, that's a 4 chord, right? And with the C in the bass, we have to put a 6/4 fifth in the bass thing. Now, before we jump up any further here, there's something else that's a process that happens in the Baroque period. It gets carried over into the classical as well. But at the beginning, composers sometimes like to just put a lot of tonic notes, in other words, note number 1 in the key underneath this stuff to sort of reinforce we're in that key. And so it's not a surprise to me that we see, of course, root position 1 chord here with the C on the bottom. And then when we go to our first 4 chord, we haven't jumped up to an F for the bass. We kept it on C. This is the beginning of the piece, and it's saying, hey, this is in the key of C. And that's going to help us understand the next chord, because here there's a B, there's an F, and there's a D. And this is starting to look like, okay, and then there's a C, right? So we've got a B and an F and a D. And then we have a C and an A flat and an F. Now this could be very confusing because it looks like we have a polychord here, which is a 20th century idea, which is you've got a BDF chord up on top, right? This. And we have this weird C, A flat, F, right? And together, if we play all those chords notes together, it sounds really crunchy, and it's supposed to, right? You might go like, no, that sounds fine to me. But what chord is it? And to make this a phrase, we're going to need 1, 4, 5, or a 7, and then 1 right here again to make that sort of authentic phrase cadence kind of sound. And what's happening here is that C, to tell us this is the beginning of the piece, and we're in the key of C, is there as well. And it's there as well. We have a special name for this. It's called a pedal tone. It's a name for a non-chord tone. And as opposed to other non-chord tones where like this goes down to the non-chord tone and steps back up and it's local like that, and you can see all the other notes. This one tends to be sort of global or across a number of notes, and it's called a pedal tone because when you played organ music, you would stick your foot down on that note with, it's a pedal note. It's actually a pedal on the organ, and you just hold it out. And we will see a C, which is tonic or home, be pedaled out at the beginning here. And towards the end, as we get back to the end of the piece and we're sliding back into the original key, you're going to see a G, which is the dominant, which is the 5 chord. And these are both going to be pedaled. Right? We're going to pedal both of those out, right? So what it means is we can ignore the C right there. It's not part of the chord. It's a pedal tone. It's helping us. It has more than just that significance in terms of intellectually, oh, we're in the key. It sounds unique. It sounds different. Like if I play a B down here or a D, right? Instead, like if I go D, A flat, G, it'd be like, and it's nice and clean sounding though, right? With the C on there, it sounds right. It has a little more teeth to it, and so he wants that through line there. So this is not a C; it's a B natural D F, and this is our leading tone, and that tells us that this is going to be a B D F A flat chord, which is a B diminished 7. Right? Which in the key of C is 7, right? So this is 7 diminished 7. Now, in theory class and just in general, once you have a pedal tone, you don't need to worry about figured bass numbers. You don't worry about inversion, at least. The sound is messed up by that pedal tone holding through, and it gets complicated. Do we put up numbers against that note, or do we ignore that note's not there and go to the next one? And the simple answer or solution to that is that we just ignore it. We don't worry about it. So we just call it a 7 diminished 7 in the key, and there's our first phrase right there, like this, okay? All right, so now we expect that we're going to be transitioning to another key. That happened in the first prelude as well. And in this case, we're going to be heading, I think, to the dominant. And I know this because we'll investigate this chord in a minute. But see this chord coming up right here? That's a D and an F sharp and a D. And this is a C, which could be a pedal tone, but it fits in the chord too. Sometimes the pedal tone doesn't fit with the chord, and sometimes it fits with the chord. And that's the characteristic of a pedal tone, is it's omnipresent, whether it fits with the chord or not. And then this is an A natural. So I have two raised notes, the A natural and the F sharp. And this D F sharp AC is a D dominant 7 chord, right? Which is 5. Now, the C in the bass, it works in the chord. It's going to be a 2 inversion, means the 7th's in the bass, of G. D is the 5 of G, and G is dominant, or the key of 5 here, and that goes back to our map of where we're going. Phrase in the key of C minor, right? And we're going to transition to the key of G minor, and just like in the chorales and things that we've done, we look for cadences. And so here is a cadence, and now we're going into transition, and here's a 5, probably a 1 right there. In fact, let's take a look at this right here. This is, we're still on camera? We're still on camera. A G, sorry, a D and a G and a D. And then we have a B flat right there and a B flat right there and a G. This is a G minor chord. Now, you could call it minor 5, but this breaking of the key signature and the dominant sound, plus what we know what we're doing in form, really tells us that we're heading to the key of G minor, right? Normally a G chord in this C minor would be raised 3rd and become a G major or G dominant chord, and that's just not the case right now. We've transitioned. We're going to the key of G minor, at least temporarily, right? So while we're doing our thing. So I know I'm in the key of G minor, and this is my 1 chord right here. And with the 3rd in the bass, it's a 1/6, and that's normal to have a 2 inversion go to a 6 inversion, or the 7th of the chord steps down there. And so we've arrived in G minor. We're in our next position here, right? So now, how far can we track this back? And in this free-flowing kind of piece, we're going to find that at some point we have to say we're definitely in G minor, and that's here, because this doesn't exist in the key of C minor except as a 5 of 5. And okay, this is an interesting chord right here. Let's take a look at it. We have an E flat, we have an A flat, and then we have an E flat right there. And we have a C and a C and an A flat. Again, I'm using the same pattern. I can see these notes are there. This is not a chord tone. That's not a chord tone. That's not a chord tone. That's not a chord tone. So we have an A flat, C, E flat. That's an A flat major chord. I'm going to stick that right there so you can see that. A flat major. What does that mean? Well, in this key right here, in the key of C that we've come from, that's a 6 chord. And it's in 1st inversion. Okay, great. But it has special significance in the key of G minor. It's a major chord on flat 2. Major chord on flat 2. So if we've done our 2nd year theory, we know that a major chord on flat 2 is a Neapolitan chord. And it likes to be in 1st inversion, and it is in 1st inversion, the 3rd's there. So this is what we call a pivoting or transitioning common chord. It is, normally I draw a bracket down here, but I'm just going to draw it like this, equals Neapolitan 6 in G minor. And that's how we transitioned right there. We actually saw him use the Neapolitan chord in the first chorale that we did as well as a transition. It's something he seems to like. It's, we think of Neapolitans and augmented 6 chords and all these other highly chromatic, interesting chords that we learn about at the midpoint of 2nd year as, being more prominent in the highly chromatic era of the Romantics, with Schumann and Brahms and Strauss and Mahler and those people. And true, they did use them extensively, but all the way back here, we find Bach's using Neapolitans and some other of these chords as well. We've seen it at a chorale. We see it here. We can find it in the inventions. So it's not, they learned it from somewhere in the Romantic era. They learned it from classical and Baroque composers like Bach, right? Okay, so we're in the key of G minor, 1/6. And let's take a look at this next chord here. This is a C and an E and a C, and it's a raised E, so it's a C major. We have a B flat and a G and an E. So what we have here is a C, E natural, G, and B flat, which is a C dominant 7 chord. There's not a lot of room there. I'm just going to put C7 right there. Okay. And in the key of that, C would be 4, right? It would be a 4 chord. But it's a dominant form. 4 would normally be minor. And so what that means is that we've turned it into a 5 of something, right? And this is very common to do. In the minor keys, the 4 chord turned into a dominant becomes the 5, 7, in this case 2 because of that, of subtonic 7, right? So what's happening here is, and I know this because the piece isn't super new for me, but is that we had our first phrase to establish our process of what kind of texture and treatment the music's going to get, and we had our first phrase, okay? Then we transitioned and we ended up in the dominant. And now that we're here, there's no time, it's a very short piece. We're going to engage some other compositional process to get us towards, through the middle part of the piece and onward to the end, to the retransition back. We might go to another key and stuff like that. And so I think the thing that Bach is doing here is he says circle of fifths. Circle of fifths, if you go down by 5 steps and 5 steps and 5 steps, is one of the strongest chord progressions we have. It's a standard device that gets used. That doesn't mean that it's tried and old and not good. It's fantastic. It's vintage. It works, right? So G goes down 5 to C. This has become its own 5 chord going down probably to an F chord right here, because that would be the subtonic 7, the lowered 7, and that's a 5th down as well. And then it might do it again and again. And so we have to see how far it goes before it bails out of that, okay? So let's take a look here. We expect this C to go down to an F chord, which will be subtonic 7. It's 5 of the F chord, right? And we have a C and an F and a C, so F, C. And we have an A flat and a flat and an F. So F, A flat, F, C. It's an F minor chord, right? Which is subtonic 7. So we'll go subtonic 7, and it's in first inversion because the third's in the bass. And again, the 5 chord with the 2 or the 7th on the bottom likes to step down to the 3rd and do that. We saw that up here earlier as well, from there to there, okay? And now if we're continuing on with this circle of fifths or going down by fifths, F will go down to B flat, and that would be the 3 chord. In fact, the subtonic 7 is in some ways the dominant or the 5 of your relative major 3. So I'm going to move this up a little bit. Let's check out our chord here. B flat, F, D, that's the B flat chord, and A flat and D and F. So we have a B flat dominant 7 chord there, right? So first off, B flat is 3, right? But because it's been turned into a dominant 7 chord because of the A flat, it's in fact turned into a 5 of something else, right? So it's 3 for sure, but because it's a dominant, it equals 5, 7 of B flat goes to E flat, okay? So this will be 5, 2, right? Because the 7th's in the bass again, of E flat, and E flat is 6, right? 6. And probably we're going to an E flat chord. Once we recognize this process here, we can see how that works, okay? All right, let's check this out. So B flat and G, non-chord tone, E flat. There's my E flat, G, B flat. There's my G, E flat in there. This is an E flat major chord, which is 6, right? Like that, right there. And because we've got the 7th in the bass, it likes to step down into the 3rd of the next chord. It's also in first inversion. So it seems like that's what's going on. It's also interesting to see that this is 5 of this chord, right? And it's in third inversion going to first inversion. Then it's 5 of this chord. So this is a little sequential pattern. Although it's tough to see because the texture is sort of the same the entire time, the chord progression and the root or bass note movements is creating a sequence. There's my 2 measure sequence and my 2 measure sequence right there. Okay. And yeah, well, we have an interesting next sort of chord coming up here. It's a little different. These things have been closing downward and downward and downward and downward and inward and inward and inward. And so if we do this, we have an A flat and a G and an E flat. So let's think about that. A flat and a G and an E flat. That's the top notes if we're following the same pattern. And here we have a C and an E flat and an A. So the only new note here is a C because we've got the E flat and the A flat right there. So what's that? Well, that's a A flat chord with the G. That's not a normal chord for the key of G minor, right? Like it was the Neapolitan before, and so A flat could be Neapolitan, right? Could be a Neapolitan 6 chord again. This G, which is the 7th of the chord, seems a little funny though. Neapolitans don't have 7ths on them, they're just triads. And this G is just prominently placed as a chord tone here. That makes me think that it's not really that, it's an A flat major 7 chord, obviously with an inversion number below. Okay, so let's think about that for a minute. It's not part of the key of G minor, because it's flat 2 and a major 7 chord. It's kind of, I mean, it could be a Neapolitan with a 7, but it suggests to my ears that maybe we're changing key again, maybe. Seems like it could be that way, or maybe not. Maybe it's just, you know, it's like Neapolitan with a major 7, okay? Let's call it that because he's done it here before, even though the G was in the non-chord tone position before, right? And we're just gonna lay this in here and call it Neapolitan 6, 5, because that's where my 7th is, right there. The figured bass works like this. A 6th above the C is the root, which is the A flat, and the 5 is right there, which gives us our 7 right there. And put a question mark there, okay? We could be in the key of E flat major. Remember, that's the other place we could go. And if that were the case, then that would be like a 4 major 7 chord, which would be my A flat major 7. Also, you know, it has sort of that essence about it as well, because this here is the 5 of A flat. I really don't think we've changed to the key of A flat because we don't see any D flats anywhere through here, and that would be a telltale sign that we've moved to A flat, and we haven't. So it's either we've changed the key of E flat, and this is my 4 chord, or we're just going on and this is Neapolitan. And the reason why that might be true is because it still keeps going on my circle of fifths, so I don't feel like we've come out of this yet, right? We haven't seen a proper cadence into a new key, all right? Wow, you know, this is a really densely packed piece of music, so if you're getting tired, you should pause, stand up, stretch. But for me, in the digital world, I'm just going to keep going, right? So A flat should go down to D or D flat, depending on whether you're thinking perfect circle of fifths. That would be a D flat, but we know that's not happening. Or D would be, you know, part of this right here, right? And let's just take a look at this for a minute. We have an A flat, a D, and a B flat, right? That's interesting, right? So that's a B flat and a D and an A flat. And I think this is going to look like a dominant 7 chord, honestly. I've got my D right there and I've got my F and the A flat. So that looks like a B flat dominant 7 chord, right? Like that. And you're kind of going like, well, didn't we just have one of those? We did. We did have one of those. I think he's curling around and he's going to be getting out of this circle of fifths here, right? But it's a B flat dominant 7, so that would mean that we've gone circle of fifths, funny chord, back up to here. It's like he's setting us up to say we're getting out of this pattern And so he's resetting us here. But this is a 5. And because the third's in the bass, it's 6/5. So the pattern's broken above my 6th chord right there, right? And, well, let's take a look then. This should be an E flat chord, and there's my E flat and G, and A flat's kind of funny, and then you've got my E flat and my B flat, right? And then my E flat again, right? B flat. I think that this is just like harmonizing here to give us kind of a pseudo, like this is the 7th of this chord right here, feel, as an alternate on the 2nd beat, right? This was like a E flat chord right here. And then this looks like a, it depends where you go, but it could be like kind of quasi like this or kind of quasi like that, right? And then it's very transient. So it depends on how strict you want to be about that. Like if I said this was a non-chord tone before, right? Even though it's in between and it's on those skips like that for the Neapolitan 6/5, this could be a non-chord tone there. We could play it and see what it sounds like to us. I'm just going to play it right here and see. So I'm down the octave, sorry. Right, and then, you know, oh no, I did that wrong. Hold on, I'm looking sideways here. My finger's in the wrong place. There we go. There we go. Yeah, I mean, it could be briefly like that, or it could be briefly recalling that. It feels like an alternative to this. It feels almost like I'm bouncing back and forth, like this is a 1/6/4 or something like that feel. But other than that, it's still E flat because it does it again right there. So this is my E flat chord, which is my 6. However, I'm wondering, since this gives us a proper redo of this cadence again, and this time it goes T-do, like T-do, if we haven't shifted to the key of E flat, right? Briefly, or you know, sort of set us up. And again, that's part of that's our relative major, right? Let's see how we go from here. Could be key of E flat, and could be a 1, maybe, right? Because it does feel like an arrival if you play through this all the way through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then, you know, the phrase is finishing up there, right? Let's just check out some more chords though, so you can see what's going on here. We have the F and the C and the A, so that's going to be and then the E flat right here, and then the A. This is an F7 chord right there, okay? I'm starting to think I'm in the key of E flat, because if this is E flat 1 and E flat, then this becomes my 5/2 of 5. That's a very common chord progression. We're seeing that, you know, in lots of different places, right? And it sort of mirrors what happened up here as well, because this looked like the 5 of 5 here, right? But then we changed, you know, it was changing key. And so over here, we expect to see a B flat chord. F7 goes to B flat. This puts us in the key of this right here. Makes sense, right? Or you could say we're in the relative major, B flat. I'm not sure it's important the way we see that until you play it and hear it. But this should be a B, D, F, D, F, D, F, A flat. So, surprise, it goes down by 5th to a B note, but not a B flat. So the circle of fifths is broken. We're definitely not feeling like we're in the key of G minor anymore, right? This is a B diminished 7 chord, and 7 diminished are what these are, and 7 diminished would be of C, which is C minor. So I think we've finished our middle section, and we're retransitioning back to the key of C. Right? Remember, our prelude is we have a phrase, we transition to a new key or keys, and then we get out of this and transition back home. And I think we're headed back home now. Okay. So if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, we can look at this a bunch of different ways, but wherever you put this here, this is 7 diminished, and this is the third, so 6/5 of C, right, which is going to be our home key, right? This is the same, except this note right here is different than this note right there. And I think what's happening is he's doing this for 2 measures, right, in the right hand, or, yeah. And then he does it again, and I'm just gonna play this. So you've got the D in the left hand to begin with. He wants to do it again, so he steps down, which then is going to take us to our C minor chord right there, right on the end of the page right here. Am I in camera for this? Barely. Let's move this up just a bit. No, I wasn't in camera for that. I apologize. So what I was saying is, after the F7 chord, we get to the 7 diminished 7 chord, B of C, and you know it's playing this pattern right here, and the fact that it goes on twice, right, it tells us that it's really important, right? And so the next time, since he's going to do it again, this is right, puts the C there. It's like a precursor to what's going to happen in the next chord. It's like a passing note that's stepping down, right? And the natural there is also giving us tension, right? And then otherwise it's the same. And then we finally arrive at to our C minor chord right here. So this is still a B diminished 7, but we just have these 2 notes changing. This comes down by a step there, and this one comes up by a half step, so it's pulling tension right there. And then we finally have our C minor chord there, right? And then this passes down into there, so he's giving us these steps down to create tension as we drive back home. I think we can say that we're in the key of C minor at this point, especially if the next page's chords bear out. But you know, where do you want to put that? It depends. You could call this equals 1 in E flat, and then we do this surprise change there. If you want to be more holistic, you could say, well, E flat equals 3, and then this is 6, right? These are going backwards. Sorry, not 6. 5 of subtonic 7, like that, right? And this would be 3 and then subtonic 7, and then instead of subtonic 7, it becomes leading tone 7. But I feel like we can call ourselves in the key of C minor at this point, or at least by here, right? Because we have our 7 chord, and it's drawn out until we get to here. And this is C minor, so this is my 1 chord, and this is my 1 with the 7th on the back of it right there. Okay, this is 7 diminished 6/5 of C minor, and if you want, you can just call it of C, or if you wanted to stay in this key, you could give it that. But we're headed to C minor at this point. I'm gonna go to the next page here. All right, and let's see what we're about here. So this is an a minor 7 chord. There's my A flat, oh maybe not, D minor, no, F, there we go, F, E flat, and F, and A flat, and C. So this is F minor 7, which would be, I remember I'm in C minor, I've come back, right? Or I'm heading back, and so this will be my 4 chord, and there's a 6 right there, which makes sense because this was with the 7th on the bottom, and the 7th resolving down to the 3rd of the next chord, down a 5th, which is what it is. And now we've got some surprise chords, and this is very typical for Bach. Since he's crashing into the end, he really wants to ratchet up the tension, so he used some secondary chords of some kind to push us back into probably the dominant of the key. So let me show you what I mean by that. We went 1, we did a transition back to 1 in the key of C minor. I'm going away from it. This is ratcheting it up. And then look, I've got a G here, and I've got a G here, and a G here, and a G here. And these are my G pedal notes that we were talking about. At the end, at the beginning, you hear this, the tonic, underneath harmony. And at the end, as we're coming back, that tells us, okay, we're coming to the end, and we're back around to the old key, right? And so we'll see those notes. And so I would imagine that this is some kind of secondary dominant to this right here. Okay, so let's check this out. F sharp, C, E flat, A, C, E flat. So that's going to be an F sharp diminished 7, which is 7 diminished 7 of G, right? Of the G. So it's pulling us, that's pulling us to there, to the dominant, right? And so this will be 7 diminished and thirds in the bass, 6, 5 of 5, right? And you know, it could be 5, but it could be 5 substitutes or 5 alternates. And I think that's the case. If we look here, it's a G, E flat, right? I don't think that this counts. I think this is the memory of like the other chord, like we did earlier over there. But if you look at C, E flat, G, this is like a C chord right here, C minor, but it's in 6/4 position, so it's 1, 6, 4. And if you remember, 1, 6, 4 equals ornamented or variant 5. So it's like a 5, right? And then this here is G and B natural, and this is like my 5 right here, right? That's my G chord right there. And so it goes 1, 6, 4, and then 5, and if we put that there, it's like a 2, and then 1, 6, 4, and then 5 again with the 2 right there. So this is just an ornamentation of the 5, right? It's a 5, went to there, okay? And it looks like we're gonna do something similar to that again here, right here. I've got again, I don't know that I need to count that. These feel like pedal tones to me. If they fit the chord, fine, but if not, they're a pedal tone that's being held out, just like the C's were tonic pedal tones at the beginning. So I've got a F sharp and an E flat and a C and an A. Yeah, this doesn't fit. This is another F sharp diminished 7 chord, which is 7 diminished 7 of 5, right? Of the 5. And the 5 is being held through. It's very much like at the very beginning where we had 7 diminished 7 of the C, and the C was in there holding it out. It's going to muddy the water against the F sharp, just like we did right there, okay? And because the pedal tone's there, we don't need to worry about figured bass. And so if we look here, we've got a C and a G and an E flat. This again is my 1, 6, 4, which is just an ornamented 5. And if you look here, I've got B natural, D, and F. This is like a 7 diminished, right? 6. And then it goes to another 1, 6, 4, and another 7 diminished 6. And that's just a variant of a 5 chord, right? 5 is GBDF, and this is just BDF. These are non-chord tones right there, right? So it's alternating. This is substitute for 5, substitute for 5, substitute for 5, substitute for 5, right? And then we have A flat and a C and a D. And this is not going to fit, but an E flat and maybe an F, or maybe these are separate themselves. I think we should maybe listen to that and see what that sounds like to us. So A flat against there, right? And then feels like an A flat chord, which is kind of interesting, right? A flat, C, E flat. Okay, So that's a A flat major chord, right? Which would be a 6 right there. Okay, but remember, A flat major was Neapolitan 6, which took us to G minor. And so this 6 is like Neapolitan of 5, right? It's the flat 2 off of the G, and that's, you know, the cadence. So this whole thing is one big, long, protracted, we're going to the G chord half cadence. And I think that's what's happening here, right? Is that we have, you know, an A flat, C, E flat chord, which is reminding us of the Neapolitan in the old key. In other words, A flat goes to G, leading tone from above, right? And so I think we call this Neapolitan of 5, right? And then here's my, we've broken it and we finished now, and we're gonna flurry to the end. So we have, this is a G7 chord right there, G, B, D, F, all of this is, you know, like that's a flat 9 if you want, but I don't know that we need that. He likes to stack chords on top of each other. So we can go G flat, flat 9, so 5, 7, flat 9, or if you want to go like 5, 7, and then 7 diminished, that's fine, but it's all part of the same chord. And then here's another pedal, and here's another pedal, and this is a C minor chord right there, right? And so this is my 1 chord right there, and then here is F sharp A, C, E flat, so it's another F sharp diminished 7, and so he's being consistent with himself. They like to do this sometimes, composers, where they, you know, whether it's Mozart in the next period afterwards, or Bach and his contemporaries, they often will get to this place and spin around a couple chords so it doesn't just feel like we're on the G the whole time, right? But look, there's the G pedal tone, and the G pedal tone, and the G pedal tone. It's all the way through. It's telling us this is dominant harmony for the key of C. And this is 7 diminished 7 of 5, and then boom, 5 right there. Okay, and then we have a cadenza. I'm not sure I want to spend all my time doing this. I mean, we can go through here, like you can say, well, I think if you play it though, if you go, you know, this is like a 5, and this is like a 1. This is like a G chord, and then a C minor chord, and then this here is the, right? So it's like, it's a sequence pattern, right? And we can go through and name each of these chords. Like this will become, you know, like it looks like it could be like part of a D chord, right? Or an F sharp chord going to the G here. So this is like some kind of, you know, like F sharpish or of something of 5, and then this is the 5, and it's actually making a little sequence to do this, which then happens again, takes us to the G chord, takes us, and now we can see more of these notes are coming in to make the G chord right there, and then this is like a C, E, A, you know, E flat, sorry, A, C, E flat, so this is like an A diminished chord, but then it connects into here with the F sharp and becomes F sharp diminished, right? And then that's going to take us back to the G. So this is like 2 and 5 of the 5 right there, which takes us to the G. And this is all just extended. Let's maneuver in and out of the G chord for this thing, right? So then we have our G chord right here, and then we have this sort of A, F, C, A flat. So this is, and then A natural, but then I think this connects through here as well, right? And we're going to get, well, let's see. We have this, and then this. Yeah, I think this is like a D, right? This is like a D diminished chord right here, right? D, F flat, A, you know, maybe with the C. It's like he does this a lot with many of the things. It's like this is a chord and this is a chord, but they kind of bind together to make a bigger 7th chord or a 9th chord, right? And then we get out of this and go to the, you know, this is our C minor right there. This ends up becoming kind of like a quasi B diminished going to there. And then we have our C minor chord here, and then we have, you know, predominant. So this is like tonic, and then predominant. And this is like my dominant again. And this is like my tonic again right here. And, you know, it's just looping. We can find that all the way through here. I think the most important thing is how did we get out of this? There's more tonic, and then dominant, and then tonic there, and then predominance right there, and then this is kind of like a dominant right there. You don't have to, I really wouldn't worry about this other than I've spent this much time on it. So there's my dominant again. See the F, G, D. This is like a B diminished chord right there, which is 7, which then takes us to our C minor chord right there. This is a D, right, or an F, A, yeah, D, F, A. It's like a D diminished kind of thing, which is going to take us to a C minor in inversion, right, because the D will take us into the E flat of that. And then here's my final G type chord, or, you know, B natural, right, D, F. So B diminished, which is going to take us here. And you'd think this should be a C minor, but last gasps. Instead, he turns this into a C dominant, right? So this is not C, it's not 1, it's 5 of 4. And this is my 4. And it's also got the C in the bass, and that's the 6/4, and that's the exact same thing that happened right here, right? And then do you remember here we had this, we had the, you know, the C, and then we had the 4/6/4 right there with the pedal, and then it goes to a 7 diminished with the pedal, and here we have the pedal again, and then we have, you know, what ostensibly is a 7 diminished, like a B diminished 7, so he's restating what he had at the beginning again, right there, so 7 diminished with a pedal. And then before he gets into this last little bit and goes finally back to like the C pedal with the G chord right there, he's gonna take us around a little bit of a circle of fifths. This is 7 of 4, and this is my 4 chord, and this is an extension of that. It's like it's kind of the same chord, 7 diminished, and then this is my 2 diminished, which is an extension of that, and then this is my C chord again, but now it's of 4, like it's got the E natural. It's like it's an extension of this right there. That's an extension of that. He's just playing this game to come down until he finally hits pedal again. This is a G chord right here, and then we finally get a C pedal, and we go and make ourselves like a 4/6/4, and then 1, and then a 5, and then finally here, we get a Picardy third, because just like in the chorales, he doesn't want to end in an unhappy thing, so he says it's modally borrowed from the major, right? So we get this last little bit here, and it goes on the page, right? And then he goes 1, 5, and then not on minor, but major, right? Like that, and ends it. Now, I guess I just want to reiterate, process that's applied. You know, he says, I'm going to do this all the way through. Key, establishment, transition, closely related key, process, in this case, the circle of fifths, gets us to E flat, transitions us back now to the home key, but instead of coming out and saying in home key, it's an extended dominant sort of prep. So although we're still analyzing the key of C minor, we don't get a nice arrival of a C chord. It's all 5 chord or going to the 5 chord, 5 chord or going to the 5 chord, Neapolitan of the 5 chord, going to the 5 chord, and even here, 5 chord, 1 chord, 7 of 5, 5 pedal, all these noodlings back and forth just to get us to the 5 chord and back to the 5 chord and back to the 5 chord, not back to the 5 chord. And then when we finally do say 1, we should be done right here. He says, nah, remember the beginning where we had a 1 chord and then it was a 4 and it had a pedal, and it was a 7 and it's a pedal? Well, he reiterates that there. He turns this into a 5 of the 4. So surprise, we're not done. There's my 4 with the pedal. There's my 7 with the pedal. And then again, 7s, 1s, 5s, until we get to the very, very end. And there's pickety third. Whew. That was not as concise at the end as I'd hoped. But hopefully you see the process here. How do we get good at doing this? Historical knowledge of the form really, really helps. If we had to dive into this and just say, what's going on here? We'd get lost, I think, because you got to have a kind of roadmap of what we're doing here. It's kind of like if I say to you, hey, let's walk to this place that we've never been before, but we've heard about it on the map. And if you don't have a good idea of how long that is, then you don't really know if you've turned off on the right trail at the right time or not. You really need to have some kind of indicator that says this is about right or this is not right, some kind of template that you can see if it's working out or not. The next thing is you have to get a sense for what process Bach has done to these chords. In this case, he's got this arpeggiating in and out thing. So these first 2 notes, right, are part of the chord, not part of the chord, back to there. Separate, different kind of part of the chord, not part of the chord, part of the chord, and then repeats, right? And so you could actually track this and do like a summary of this. You could say, well, this is my first chord right here. And from the bass, right? And hold that there. And then look at the beginning of the next measure and say, well, it goes to here. And then, you know, I'm going to leave the pedal tone in, so it's going to sound a little muddy. But then the next one is this, right? And then measure 4. And I'm just pulling those beginning notes from each one of these chords, right? Like that. Then you could hear it like a chorale even, right? So again, it's what to not look at that helps you get not confused about things. And then obviously a knowledge of chord sequences, circles of fifths, those kind of things. That would be really helpful. Anyhow, if this is way over your head, that's fine. This is hard for even a second-year student to get through. We hope that they can with some guidance. I think that you can. You sort of steer them in the right direction and they can do a lot of this on their own. If you're a first-year student, then you try and glean what you can, and then you say, I'm not going to be too worried about this chord or that chord, because you'll learn about them later, but you take what you can out of it. And let's say you don't have very much music theory, but you know a little bit about chords and keys and things, and you're playing this piece like the gentleman from the Netherlands. Then I think that that seeing the keys that you're in first off, oh, it's this key and now it's this key, and seeing how closely they're related to each other, or saying this section, now that we're in this key, is doing a circle of fifths, or this is where we're transitioning back to the home key, but even then it's a series of, let's go to the dominant, let's re-go to the dominant, let's re-go to the dominant. Tells you how to play this. This is your expositional opening section. This is transition. This is the middle part, which is kind of developmental. This is retransitioning back home. Then we have a cadenza, and we have finally a memory of what happened at the beginning. So you can take what ostensibly just seems like lots of movement and start to break it into sections. Then you can have you ask what's their function and what are they doing, and then that gives you a momentum to think about and a way of memorizing this in chunks, right? And then if you understood all of this like a second-year student or a third-year student that's now doing Baroque music and they need to go back and sort of brush up on this for a piece, that's great. There's other things to look at now, which we're not going to do in this video, but like voice leading, bass line leading, even seeing similarities of chord progressions in different keys, like we saw the Neapolitan here. And although it's kind of like a Neapolitan, it's not quite classically a Neapolitan because of the G natural. It happens again, going there. And then here at the end, we have this, which seems like the Neapolitan of the G again right there. And so we can track higher level orders of things going on, or even motivic ideas through the piece. Yeah. Okay. Well, it wasn't a half hour. It was an hour. Hopefully it's as useful for some people, or at least you can stow it away and say, like, one day when I'm taking a form class or a counterpoint class or a history class where Bach's involved, you can come back and find this information, because it will always be up there, and it will always be there for you to